Well, hello and welcome to Polity Matters. My name is Ben Ratliff, and I am all alone today. I don't have my co-host with me. They're on vacation somewhere, unreachable, and all my messages go green when I text them, and that's the worst thing in the world, so I just don't text them right now. But I have more than enough replacement for them today, helping me out as we reflect on the 53rd General Assembly that occurred last week in Louisville, Kentucky. Pleased to welcome back to the show Steve Tipton, Fred Greco, and new to the show today is Jonah Cleveland. Let's we know two of the guys. Let's start with Jonah. Jonah, welcome. We're glad that you're with us. Ruling elder, tell us what you're up to. Just kind of give us a little bit so we know what we're grabbing onto.
Yeah, newly ordained ruling elder back in May. This was I'm at Covenant Presbyterian Church in Panama City, Florida, ruling elder with Steve Tipton. I was a deacon for about 10 years before that. I'm just really blessed to be able to go to my first GA last week. And just really enjoying it.
Yeah. Did Steve have to twist your arm too much to get you to go to GA, or were you interested?
I was interested.
Yeah.
No, he didn't have to twist too hard.
Fellow nerd. I get it.
It's rock, paper, scissors around here, especially in Louisville. There's a good love of bourbon on my session, and I thought we were going to have a fist fight at one point, but it all worked out, and the other two ruling elders just providentially were not able to go. So, and Jonah was more than excited. Whatever more than excited is, that's what he was.
Yeah. Mr. Stated Clerk, right. You have a whole new glow to you these days. You just seem like a full person finally.
Well, we are settling in, which is its own excitement and adventure. And I'm learning, I posted on social media this morning that I went into the Georgia Driver Division Services or something, whatever their version of the DMV is, with fear and trepidation. With all of my BCO and Roberts and REO experience, I had no idea if I was going to be in the right line with the right papers and the right things. And the penalty for that is to be sent back and have to do it all over again. So I was sorely afraid. But I managed to do half of what I needed to do, which is to get a Georgia license. Now I just need to make my cars Georgia cars. Yeah. So we're trying to get that pulled together after a busy week.
That might not be a bad way to describe the 53rd Assembly last week. We got about half done of what we expected to get done or planned to get done. But we were all there. We had an unusually large docket. Mel referenced it a couple of times from the front. Just historically large list of things to get done, including what was handed to our Overtures Committee, and then certainly what came to the floor. And a couple of those things were mitigated by two of our study committees giving partial reports, and they're going to come back next year. Also, so not only did we have a lot of work, there was a lot of talk this year about feeling a little more unified during the assembly. I don't know if this is actually true or not. I hear a lot of guys talking about it. So my first opening kind of question as we try to reflect on last week a little bit is what's your big picture, either going into it or your takeaway, kind of like what was the assembly like? Was it more unifying than normal, or did we just kind of throw everything into an omnibus so many times that it just felt like we were unified? Just kind of open it up, general reflections. Any thoughts, guys?
Yeah, so I think part of it is, it's sort of like when you walk into a session meeting and the docket is 3 pages long. You realize that you can't spend an enormous amount of time on everything. And so you do end up moving through business a little bit more quickly. And I think both, certainly in Overtures Committee, which I was a part of this year, but even when we got to the floor, there was this assumption that we had a lot of work to do. And maybe on paper we did, but when it really came right down to it, it was not much different than it is every year. And so when you have an RPR report that takes a third of the amount of time that I don't want to say anticipated, but that it did last year, and certainly than we docketed. And then, as you said, the 2 study committee reports, which took almost an eighth of what was docketed. And then even some of the things just moving through it a little bit more quickly, I suppose. And then even when you add in, the the elephant in the room, Clickergate. After we could talk about that later.
Yeah.
There was still just not. I don't really feel like there was a lot of business. It was a pretty normal year, and between the way the agenda was set up and some other things, I don't know, just didn't feel as much as it looked like on paper.
Fred, what about from an administrative standpoint going into an assembly with this much on paper? What's that look like, and what were preparations like for that?
So we were prepared for a long assembly. You may not have noticed it in the drafts of the dockets. John Bice and the administrative committee prepared those, but I had some input obviously coming in. So the way we docketed things, and we reduced the Thursday night worship service by half an hour, and we tried to tighten up some other areas of the docket so we would, not run until Friday. I don't know that we've run into Friday in maybe more than a decade. I can't remember the last time we've gone into Friday. And if we didn't this year, we may never, I hope. But I think there was a sense of unity that isn't normally seen unless you're really an experienced assembly goer. So this was my 23rd assembly. And for example, the RPR report did not take nearly as long as previous years. And I think there was two reasons for that. The first reason was Steve did an excellent job organizing it and getting it in people's hands in advance. That's going to be a fixture. I'm going to make sure we do that in the future, because normally we waste about 45 minutes with guys saying, where are we going? What do we have? What numbers? What presbytery? And we just waste time. That was super well organized, and it did that. And Guy Waters did the same thing. Instead of having one omnibus with 50 overtures, he grouped them so that it was easier for folks to see what they were doing, and they were less likely to pull them out of the engrossed motion. Those things helped tremendously. I also think the unity is seen in that, last year, it seemed like every 5 seconds somebody was pulling one of the recommendations out of RPR, and it took an eternity. There were only a couple, which meant that the assembly was fine with the report, which should be the case because most of the report is simply a first citation to a presbytery. Tell us what went on here. It's not worth debating.
Yeah.
Wait to see what comes back. Now, the other thing is with the Overtures Committee, I have, and since from now, dubbed Dr. Guy Waters Dr. No, because there were so many no's. And I don't know if Jonah caught this as a first-time commissioner. I got up and did my best to dissuade people from debating items that they could not change. A lot of assemblies, when the Overtures Committee recommends no, guys stand up and they want to make a long speech. They want to make an amendment. They think they can make a substitute, and you just can't under our rules. Like it or don't, that's the rules. If you don't like it, draft an overture to make an amendment. But guys didn't take a lot of time to do that. Now, to get back to the unity point, I get teased by my brother, Steve Dowling, who moderated the year after me. And I held the record for adjournment for a whole 1 year. I broke Ligon's record that was like 15 or 20 years old. And my response to Steve was, I had more minority reports than you did. But that's really true. Minority reports take basically a minimum of an hour. And we only had one this year. If we'd have had four, we'd have gone into the wee hours of Thursday.
Right.
But we didn't. And I chalked that up to the brethren knew that it wasn't worth trying to go uphill against 100 to 25 vote in overtures just to try to do it. Better to try next year, refine the overture, something like that. That's not just not wanting to talk. That's submitting to the will of the assembly and its committees. And I think that's the main reason that we got out at the good time that we got out this year.
Yeah.
A little inside baseball for folks. So, if the Overtures Committee, for an example, recommends we answer an overture in the negative, you can either say yes to that, or you can say no to that, which recommits it to the Overtures Committee, which usually is going to meet next year at that point.
Yeah.
And so there's very little to do with a negative recommended overture. And so... yeah, I felt that a lot in my seat. A lot of guys were like, well, there's nothing I can't really accomplish anything more than I could do if I just sent this in again next year. I'm like, fantastic. Now stay in your seat. Just
and it's
try
actually
to click your button.
It's kind of worse than that too, Ben, because the people that want to argue the no's or the refer backs, let's say you give a great speech on the floor and we decide we vote against the committee's recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Now the worst thing happens. It gets referred back exactly as it was sent up this year to next year.
Yeah.
And so if you decide to change it, now we have two overtures, last year's referral and your new one. So it's kind of and I get that people want to, it's sort of a release valve in a way, right? My overture failed, or the one that I really liked failed. And I really want to get up on the floor and make a speech about it. And to a certain degree, I don't have a problem with that. This year, it would have been very difficult because of the number of them. Although I would say that probably 80% of all of the overtures were, whether they were good or bad or important or unimportant, they were not the kind of overtures that were going to get somebody to go to a microphone at the end of the assembly and say, we really need this small change in section 13 that no one knows about, and it really won't do anything, but it makes it clearer. That kind of argument's just not going to.
Jonah, first time going as a commissioner. Have you ever been before now? Like in person?
No.
Okay.
I'd done the live stream a couple years ago.
Real true nerd. I love it. That's good.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk a little bit towards the end about some of your kind of more particular impressions, but like, you got any hot, like, big impressions to share with us here at the beginning as we just kind of think about these types of things?
Just the only thing that really stuck out to me was because, like, you see all the online chatter back and forth of the people that like to speak out loudly, and there really was none of that in the assembly. Like, the assembly was really unified on the majority of the issues, and I just thought that was a really good aspect of the assembly.
Well, here, let's talk leadership real quick, since we've got one of the guys here. So this year, Mel Duncan was elected to serve as our moderator. Glad to have him. We had two great nominees this year. I'm not trying to say anything about Jay, but Mel was fantastic. Enjoyed having him. And Fred, you were elected as our new stated clerk this year. And maybe real quick, we've covered this certainly in the past, but what is your job, more or less? What do you do as a stated clerk?
At General Assembly, I help facilitate the docket and parliamentary procedure and et cetera. You may have noticed I was appointed the assistant to the provisional stated clerk, which started the office memes like crazy.
They even gave you a sign. I mean, it said it right in front of you. It was
correct.
Unbelievable.
That's correct. And I'm used to being a meme, so that's okay. But I had to decide right off the bat whether I was going to whisper in John's ear so John could whisper into Mel's ear. And then we sort of came to a consensus that I would just go right to Mel and be able to do that. So this was my first assembly where I really couldn't go on the floor and make any points of order or et cetera. So that was a little bit different. The clerk also is the main point of contact for the denomination for churches and presbyteries and elders. And I said that, I think, in my acceptance speech. My plan is to get to every presbytery. I've already been invited in the last week to about 15. So I've just got to work that out with my wife and my calendar. I've already, been on the phone with 5 or 6 ministers about challenges in a discipline case or a presbytery issue in the last 3 days. And I'm like most pastors, I'm energized by that kind of work. I like to do it. As I think you recall, Ben, I'm a former corporate attorney, so I've got kind of that bifurcated brain. And so I'm really looking forward to doing that and getting to meet more churches and presbyteries and et cetera. I'm actually really excited about working with the staff. The staff is just dynamite. Some of the staff I've known for 20 plus years because I've served on nominating committee and SJC and a bunch of other things. But I'm really excited to get on board with them. That's another main thing. The clerk kind of leads the administrative committee's staff and to do that. And I finally now am in a place where Steve cannot say that he is, which is when someone calls with trouble, I can't say, sorry, can't talk to you. I'm on the SJC and this matter may come before the SJC. Now I can say, I'd love to help you. That's my job. And Steve is amongst many hoping that I deflect or help matters so they don't come to the SJC and reduce their docket.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, usually
I'm
if they're
excited
calling
about
you
this.
for help, it's coming before the SJC. Right?
Yes,
Yeah, it's too late.
that's right. That's right.
We a friend of mine was talking about how sometimes on a job description will say they want a go-getter, and we were like, what does that mean? I don't remember who the guy was, but go-getter, self-starter. You just want somebody that can, kind of maybe make some moves on their own. As a stated clerk of the PCA, is there anywhere where you can kind of have goals to improve or bring better mechanisms, or are you really just required to do the things that are in front of you and not change anything? I don't know the right way to ask the question, but I think I know what you're asking. What I'm asking, rather.
Well, the clerk is, the clerk is not the bishop. The clerk is not the pastor of the PCA.
Yeah.
The clerk is not the director of everything. The clerk is a facilitator and a helper. And so I think there's areas for improvement, as there is always in any organization. One of the ways that I can improve on what John Bice was doing was just do what John did for more hours in a week.
Yeah.
Now, everybody needs to know that when the chairman of the AC got John to agree to be the provisional clerk, he told him it was about a 15-hour a week job. That was an understatement, to say the least. But at the same time, John wasn't living in Atlanta, wasn't probably putting in the average week 50 or 60 hours. He's probably putting in full-time hours most weeks, maybe more than that some weeks. But I'm going to be here working, more than full-time, 50, 60 hours, doing that and getting in that. I also want to improve on things that are already the clerk's responsibility. So this past month, I went to the OPC's General Assembly. They told me I was the first sort of stated clerk person. John was with me as well, in 18 years to visit their assembly. I intend to do that every year if I can on my schedule. I intend to foster, NAPARC connections with the ARP and the RPCNA and other denominations. I'm going to Korea later in the fall to see if I can get the PCA in the ICRC. I'm going to South Africa, Lord willing, in the spring because we're starting up an international RUF there in Africa. And so I want to kind of double down on what former clerks have done and the job requires. And I'm really excited about that and being able to do that.
That's great. The only other thing on leadership that I wanted to touch on related to the assembly was Clickergate and Mel's fantastic moderation through the whole ordeal. I'm sure that nobody outside of our world cares at all what Clickergate is, but since we're in our world, normally we have voting devices, and I don't know about y'all, but the ones we were using before this year always worked pretty well for me. Even if I had to trade it in maybe once or twice over the last 10 years on any given moment, it usually just kept working. It wasn't a problem. But this year we had to change voting device manufacturers or companies or whatever, and there was just a lot of trouble. Guys were having a lot of trouble getting their votes registered. They took a long time. We resorted to standing votes and counted votes at a couple of points where the floor clerks would have to go around and count. I mean, what was maybe Steve or Jonah, I'll ask y'all, what was your impression of Mel and his leadership through that? I can't stop singing his praises, I think, when it comes to it, but I'll let somebody else talk about it.
Yeah, I thought he did a great job. I think the counted vote seemed to take as long as the clicker when we did that for the nominating committee. I thought those floor clerks did a good job getting that done in a pretty good time. Yeah, I mean, even with I didn't have the issues. My clicker worked relatively well the whole assembly, but I feel for the brothers that were struggling. There was a big group around microphone 2 for a while there.
I feel like every year the same people have trouble with their voting device. I'm just gonna be like, there's a common denominator here, guys. You got a metal plate in your head. I mean, what's the deal?
Well,
it's those hot spots.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, Thursday night after everything, I and Jonah and our other ruling elder Rocky went out to dinner. As we were talking about the whole week, right? I mean, most people come to the GA really to do two things, right? They come to discuss the issues, and sometimes that means listen to other guys, right? They're not going to go to a microphone, but they want other people to have the opportunity to speak, which was cut off way too quickly at certain points, but that's another topic.
It's a whole nother
But then the other big thing is they go there to vote. And if their votes aren't being counted, then even if we got every vote or whatever, it really wouldn't have changed the outcome. I'm here to push a button and say yes or no. somebody comes to abstain, I still don't know why that's an option. You can abstain by not voting or by staying home, I suppose. Well, that's sorry. But I come to say yes or no, right? And if I can't do that, then it's very frustrating. I'd also say that actually the counted votes, apparently Karen Fry timed it, and the counted vote was like 10 minutes, and the regular vote was like 4 minutes. But I do think the difference is that when we're waiting for the electronic voting, it just became like a dance party without the dancing, I guess. But I mean, just everybody kind of gathered around talking, and it really didn't feel like the assembly was moving forward. And at least if you're doing the counted votes, something's happening, right? Votes are being counted, they're being tabulated, we're moving forward. And we just kept having those moments where it felt like nothing was happening, mostly because nothing was happening. And so that was a little bit, I don't know, just confusing. It brought in some odd moments to the assembly, which weren't, odd in the sense that they're not normal. I got to talk to a lot more people during the votes than I normally do, but that's not really the point of that time on the floor.
And I think, Ben, part of it is we're used to the clickers now and the quick votes.
Yeah.
So I'm old enough to remember being in a General Assembly in which there was a motion to extend debate for 5 minutes. And we took a voice vote that was inconclusive. And we had a standing vote that was inconclusive. And then we counted, the floor clerks counted. And it took us more than 5 minutes to determine if we were going to go 5 minutes. That's usual. And, we're used to the clickers just working. A few people, there's the jokes about zombie clicker, holders and whatever, but usually they work. And I will say, again, to give a shout out to my folks, Steve's exactly right. We were wondering up front how we should do it. And Karen Fry ran up to the front with her phone and she said, the clickers took 4.5 minutes. This is the floor clerk vote, and it was 10 and change. And then, I don't know if you recall, I made an announcement. It wasn't my announcement. Heidi Harrison, who helps us out on this aspect of things, she sent me a text that said which clickers were assigned to which towers. And I think that helped a little bit because guys realized they were on one end of the assembly and their tower was on the other end, because it wasn't based on, I think, a first registration. I think it was based on when you got your clicker, when you checked in, and they don't know where you're going to sit. So guys kind of shuffled a little bit, and that helped a little bit too. But I'm very confident that we'll make improvements and we'll figure things out. There's no way to do it without, everyone has a solution. They're like, well, use cell phones. Well, not every elder has a cell phone. Well, let's use, some app. Well, how do you make sure someone in the hall who's not a commissioner doesn't get the app? So we've got to do some work. But as I said to the business administrator this morning, we got a little bit of time to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the funny thing is that in the end, with all the trouble with voting, we finished before dinner on Thursday. That's a big win. Before we left, I told our whole congregation in Sunday school the week before, I said, I haven't given you all a lot to pray for GA. We're going to talk about it afterwards, but the one thing you should pray for is that we will finish before dinner on Thursday. And so you can thank the members of Covenant Cleveland for their prayers, giving Mel strength to get us through. Yeah, Clickergate, man. You just can't make this stuff up. Let's I had some notes in here about particular overtures, and I don't know how much I want to get into the weeds on some of these things. Let's talk about the study committees for just a minute, and we'll circle back around in a second. So the Fred, I didn't give you this question ahead of time, so I'll give it to you, and then I'll talk for a second, and maybe have the guys talking, and if you want to throw an answer out in a minute. I know a lot of people that are confused about why the Directory for Worship Committee did not bring recommendations this year and gave a partial report. So that's kind of, I think that's on people's minds. Obviously, I think the study committee on Christian nationalism, David Strain, the chairman, got up and said, there's some things we need to correct and we have more work to do. That was pretty clear what was going on there. We're gonna keep producing some material and have a fuller report next year. So we're waiting on that one. What could we say to help folks understand what's going on with the Directory for Worship Committee?
So, odd interim committees, study committees, they're technically odd interim committees. That is Latin for between assemblies. Committees don't normally bring constitutional amendments. The last time they did this was in the early 90s when we had a committee on judicial business that gave us the SJC and some other changes in our structure. And so there are provisions which are convoluted and quite frankly need to be fixed. So Ben, get your overture writing hat on and take my place now that I won't be writing overtures. And so it was confusing as to the way that these recommendations would get to the assembly. How many days in advance did they need to get there? Did they need to go through the overtures committee? Could they come directly to the floor? Would they be debatable on the floor? And what everyone decided was it would not be wise to bring, whatever it is, 12 chapters of the BCO to the floor for all debate, amendment, substitution, et cetera, like the RPR report, that would keep us there until August. And so the committee is chaired by a friend of mine, Nate Sheridan. He was trying to figure out the way to do this. I was advising him along with members of the Committee on Constitutional Business and John Bice and other parliamentarians, including Jane Eikirk, ironically, and Mel and David Coffin. And we decided that it would not be easy or proper to bring them directly to the assembly. They would have to go through the overtures committee. And that was CCB's advice. And you can imagine the last thing the overtures committee wanted with 91 overtures was a 12-chapter committee report to go through. And so Nate and his committee decided that rather than to try to shove this through and try to what's called suspend the rules, which is a very high threshold. You need 2/3 yes, and it has to be a majority of all enrolled commissioners. And that's hard to get because not everybody's in the hall at the same time. And so it was thought that would be hard to do and would be more confusing than to just tee this up for next year. I will say there's something else, too, that's kind of good in Presbyterianism. You may have heard me say this, and I'm going to keep saying it throughout my tenure. Slowness is a feature, not a bug of Presbyterianism. And so going this way allows the committee to get feedback from presbyteries, ministers, theologians, ruling elders, licentiates, candidates. And not that they're going to incorporate every comment they get, but they can get feedback about what is really, well-liked and what needs to be tweaked and not and whatever. And I think Nate is going to go on a little tour of presbyteries and talk to folks. So the idea is to hope to come with maybe some small tweaks, some changes next year that'll make it, very likely that this will pass, because it doesn't just need to pass the assembly. It needs to pass 2/3 of presbyteries, which is a very high bar. Last assembly, I drafted 5 overtures that made it through the General Assembly. Almost 4 of the 5 made it with 90% plus votes, and 2 of them died in the presbyteries. It's a hard bar, and it should be, to change the Constitution. Yeah. So this, I think, is actually a good result, and I can say I like the fact that this will help attendance in Milwaukee. So every elder who's hearing this, the weather in Milwaukee is gorgeous in June, much better than Mobile and Houston and Dallas. So plan now to come to Milwaukee and be a commissioner at General Assembly.
So study committees, we did a thing. I can't remember the last time we did it. We now have 3 study committees going. We got a threshold vote for a study committee on artificial intelligence. I have no idea if this will play or not. But Steve or Jonah, do you guys have any thoughts at all on our AI committee? You don't have to be pro or con necessarily. You just anything at all on that committee that's been formed or that's being formed, I suppose.
Yeah, I was in favor of it. I think sometimes it takes me a little bit to get behind study committees when I usually see them. Yeah. It's not study committee fatigue. I don't think that exists anymore. It's just being generally opposed to them more often than not.
Yeah, it's a principle.
The 2 that we had that started last year, I thought both of them were going to be important, and I was in favor of both of them. I was also in favor of AI. My hope, and I think the way that the guys that I've been talking to that'll likely be on it, they're not going to try to explain what it is. I mean, obviously that's a piece of it, but that's not the point. It really is to look at what are the ministry implications of this. And the way I put it to somebody is, imagine if we had had a study committee on, social media 10 years ago, or probably more like 20 years ago, that could have had some helpful advice to churches, maybe through churches to parents, on what this is going to end up being or how influential. I mean, I think all of us would say there could have been some benefit to something like that. And I think this is infinitely more, maybe not infinitely more, but an order of magnitude more kind of life impacting, life changing for not just teenagers as it was with social media, but all of us and all the things that we do. And so thinking through some broad principles, some broad kind of ethical concerns, I think those are good things. And I'm glad we're doing it. And the guys that I know who were super in favor of it, that's really what they want to do, right? Not to be the gold star report on what AI is, right? Or all of its uses, or even on the other end, the environmental impact and all that, which is not, I'm not saying those are unimportant issues. They're just not things that we need to be talking about. It's the ethical issues, I think, that are more the important things that we can discuss, we can speak into.
John, you got any thoughts?
I just had, I do. I was in favor of it more because in my day job, it affects me. I've had people, I'm a design engineer, and I've had people say, I asked you this question and I asked AI and got the same answer. Why do I need you? Type, so like it does hit home for our congregants, and I think we need counselor, being able to counsel and shepherd our flocks on how to deal with those situations that come up. And I think, and hopeful that the study committee can do that. I'm excited for it. I think good work will come from it.
As far as defining it, as long as we start with AI is not the same as Google, and then you'll probably be good to go. I think I heard that on the floor at one point.
But it's also not Skynet, so it's not Google.
Right.
It's somewhere between those two.
Somewhere in there. Yeah.
Steve, since we've got you, let's talk about RPR. You chaired RPR this year. I feel like that's all we ever talked to you about.
Did I?
Yeah. Did you? I can't remember. Fred said it, and I remembered. That's how easy everything went. RPR, we're not going to define anything. If you're listening to this episode, you should know what we're talking about. I'm not gonna give you a leg up. RPR in the past has had this vibe, I think, that guys want to come and litigate on the floor. And so even for like a first citation, kind of what Fred talked about already, guys want to debate it on the floor. They want to go crazy about why are we doing this and stuff. And you just kind of want to say, hey, let the presbytery respond. There could have been a typo somewhere that they are going to let us know about. It's probably not that insignificant, but let the first exchange happen. RPR went faster this year. Do you have any thoughts or reflections on any of that? I mean, besides your excellent leadership skills and your fantastic document that you produced in addition to your report. Okay, I'm sorry. I will try not to embarrass you anymore. Any reflections from the chairman on what helped RPR this year, or on how it went in general? Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, no, I think a couple of things. So partly it is, I mean, every year you get the sort of box of chocolate effects with RPR because you never know what you're going to expect. That's the box of chocolate effect. Sorry, Jonah's looking at me like I'm crazy.
He was looking at me because that's the title of the episode. I'm almost certain that's what was going on.
Okay.
Yeah, so
It's a good title there.
Let me start over again. So the thing with RPR is because you get so many different readers, it all depends on who reads what and what presbyteries are looking at as to what they're going to pull out and what they're going to see. And so every year there is some differences in the issues that are raised. I also think this year, both in kind of pre-meeting training and interaction with read teams, and then some of the comments that I made actually at the meeting to different individuals, was we lowered the, I don't want to say lowered the bar, maybe we raised the bar, I don't know. But with some of the kind of picky exceptions that were proliferating in years past, we toned those down a little bit. Some we moved to form, some we just kind of, I don't want to say we ignored them, but we realized, okay, they're not as important as some people would have said they were in years past. So I think that was helpful in limiting the scope of the report as it goes to the floor. There was also a lot more unity. There were only about six to eight presbyteries at the meeting where there was significant debate during our PR's meeting. So I think that helped out a lot. And then also, three of them were kind of on the same issue. All three of those got pulled out of the report last week. But then when the first one kind of didn't pass the assembly, the other two just went by the wayside. So I think there's some of that. But all in all, I think this is closer to what RPR was like maybe the mid to late teens, where you really didn't have a lot to fight over. Occasionally there would be somebody, usually it was, some stated clerk would stand up and hold up his minutes and say, see, it's right here. And for a while that actually worked, right? No one sees it, no one knows it, but he stood up and he said it. So I guess it's not it really isn't an exception or whatever. But I also think the other piece of that is that there is a better understanding that it is wise to let the presbyteries respond, especially those first citations, give them an opportunity to respond. I think one of the things that's going to help too is, as a denomination, if we could stop treating the RPR report as if we are definitely saying, by signing a presbytery about, let's say, Paedo communion, that means something globally in the denomination about a particular issue. It really doesn't. And both of the instances that we dealt with on the floor, one of them was a very long stated difference that was very unclear, even though it was like a page and a half. The other one was one sentence. I don't know that it was so much, at least at the committee level, was so much about Paedo communion, quote unquote, per se, as it was this individual's exposition of his belief and understanding. And the last thing I'll say, and you can feel free to cut out whatever this you don't like, but the last thing I would say is that I think there's also a growing understanding with most members of the committee and most members of the assembly that RPR is a horrible way to try to change the denomination. That's actually not what it's designed to do anyway, but it's a really hard way to make the changes that people think that they should make, we should make as an assembly. And so my hope is that year after year, it'll be less and less of a quasi-judicial, it isn't a judicial at all, but a pretend judicial process where we can rid ourselves of things that we don't like. That's not its purpose.
As a pastor kind of down on the ground, so to speak, not up at General Assembly doing big things, but having gone to the SJC on the other side of this, and having a judgment come back down to our presbytery as a result. Not only RPR is not meant to change things in the PCA, but the SJC is also, Fred, you've said this to me lately, I can't remember when it was. The SJC ruling is only binding on the parties. It doesn't set a precedent. I mean, you might be able to see patterns and you see maybe what to expect or whatever, but it doesn't bind. It's not a precedent-setting thing for the PCA. And so what I mean about being down to the ground, it really takes work in your presbyteries especially to see change in the PCA. If you want to accomplish something, if you see a problem that needs addressing, you've got to work hard for it. You can't just get some ink passed at GA and think that, okay, well, this is going to work, or get somebody cited at RPR and think it's going to fix the problem. It takes hard labor and a lot of prayer and diligence and faithfulness. And anyway, that's a soapbox I'll get off, but we also, we're not going to touch on all this just because I don't want to, but we talked about female deacons a lot this year. We talked about accountability for the stated clerk and the coordinators. Overtures to those ends were answered in the negative, and so we won't have anything going out on those this year. There were some matters related to functional female officers. I think it was Overture 52 that got answered in reference to 37. I expect we're going to see something like that come back in the future to have a statement about those in particular. I do want to ask kind of about the health of the denomination. Another kind of big issue that's been on people's minds is the whole matter of MNA's situation lately. Steve Dowling was brought in to kind of oversee some just to give some oversight to MNA, and he's going to continue on doing that. I think most of the guys I talked to on any side of the PCA, if you want to call it that, were super encouraged with Steve's report. Really glad that he's there. And then we also have some new presbyteries that were formed, which even though there was a little contention around one of those, even on the floor, is a good sign. The PCA is growing. We're expanding our presbyteries to cover more ground and plant more churches. Anything, Fred, especially you, maybe want to say related to the health of the PCA and those kind of good signs we're seeing?
Well, I think the PCA is as healthy as it's ever been. I'm very optimistic about the PCA. I think we're headed in a very good direction. Praise the Lord for Steve Dowling. Obviously he's at MNA. You forget he's on the Christian Nationalism Committee. You forget he's on the SJC. You forget he's a ruling elder with a full-time job. Okay? So, he's just, and he does it for the love of the church. He really does. I'd be very curious, if I can intrude on you for a moment, Ben. Jonah, what did you think of the committee reports? Because as a first-timer, that's the first time you're really getting a sense, maybe in detail, of what our committees, MNA, MTW, RUF do. What was your impression of those reports, not just of the ministries themselves, but of what it conveyed and conveyed well or could use improvement?
Yeah. Good question. I had read the reports from the commissioner's handbook. So
we're supposed to read the reports. But sorry.
I was encouraged to do so in preparation. So I trying to get just kind of a little ahead of the game, so it's not all new, especially with M&A. And I thought Steve Dowling did a fantastic job with his report and the communication, both through the report and the By Faith article he had beforehand. As far as the reports on the floor when they were given them, I thought all of the ministries did a good job presenting their concerns and what's going on, what's good. And yeah, even the M&A report was focusing on the work that they're doing and how to get back to being better. But just Steve Dowling was just so encouraged with all the good things that M&A is doing too, that was encouraging to me. And I think it just shows that there is a lot of good work being done behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. And I don't know how. I'm sure there's a way to do it, to get that more publicized of all the good work. Because I think that's the encouragement we want everyone to see, right? And even the hard work, even the M&A work that's going on to get the ship righted, being transparent and, identifying where the work is being done and how well it's being done.
And I just add, I think Steve Dowling set the gold standard for permanent committee videos. And I'm hoping that more permanent committees really look to him and see. Now, his comedic timing it needs work. He was already halfway through the next sentence before half the people in the room realized what he'd just done. But
it did go
video production quality just through the roof.
Solid.
I'm still stunned.
Solid. Well, Fred, I'm glad you asked Jonah that question, because I did want to kind of follow up with him a little bit. We've never had a first-time ruling elder commissioner on the show after a General Assembly. This is our third GA to report on as a podcast. So I did want to just touch base. Classic, almost silly-sounding questions, but I think helpful for people. Can you help us think through what surprised you at General Assembly? You went in as a polity nerd. You've watched it before. That's a big deal. But surely there was something you weren't expecting, or something that you were pleased to be surprised by. I don't know.
Yeah. Honestly, walking into the assembly hall the first time, Tuesday night with worship, and just that full assembly hall with all the elders singing their hearts out to the Lord is just was a wonderful blessing. And like I had heard from another ruling elder who had gone a couple years ago, and just how great that is. But until you experience all those men singing and their families, the families that are there, that was a really big blessing walking into that. And yeah, it was surprising. Even expecting it, it was still surprising how good that was.
It's a big room. It's a big
Yeah.
room. Anything particularly confusing that you're gonna pay more attention to next year, or that you would encourage first timers to be aware of as they go?
Yeah. Trying to understand, I know we talked about it a little bit, but trying to understand overtures committee. Um, a yes can become a no, but a no can't become a yes. And I know Fred did a great job at explaining that. And I still asked Steve a few questions while everything was going on. And it clicked. It just is keeping track of it. As different people are debating and bringing up discussion points. And, but I was thankful for the debates.
That can be really confusing because when the committee recommends no and you agree, you have to vote yes on the no.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
right.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I was thankful for a lot of the debates. I know the question got called a few times, and I actually voted to not call the question on a couple of those, just because some of the debates were going well, especially in some of the minority reports. I wanted to hear more, and I know our other ruling elder wanted to too, but that's part of the business and part of just moving forward. But just trying to, maybe I just need to read Robert's rules more often.
More often, yeah, whatever.
Never at all. Yeah.
How about reflecting back towards your congregation? I think sometimes this is a place where we sort of stay in our bubble. Like we talk about polity all year long. GA's our pastor camp. Like, we love this thing. It's our Super Bowl. That's a sports thing, right? What about you're coming back? You're going to talk to your family, your congregation as a ruling elder. Like, what's in your mind thinking about the fact that they supported your way to this event, to this meeting of the church court? What's significant for our congregations related to General Assembly that we should keep in mind?
Yeah, that's really where I fell in love with the idea of General Assembly, was hearing the previous teaching elder at Covenant and Steve each year coming back and just giving that report and seeing how much they enjoy it and the good work that they're doing really is what encouraged me to dive deeper into it. So now, because I think we're going to be doing that this next Sunday, just try to convey that the PCA is in a good spot. The PCA is doing the Lord's work, and it's the right work that we as a PCA congregation need to keep praying for and pushing forward.
Well, I'll ask this of Jonah in particular to start with, and then either of you other two brothers. Last thoughts as we conclude our discussion about General Assembly, maybe in particular as a first-time commissioner. Anything else you wanna say or think about? Or
if there's any ruling elders that think they might want to go, I would just encourage to start planning now. I think when our nominations opened up for elders and I got nominated back last September, I went ahead and blocked out my vacation calendar for GA this last week, with the hopes, that everything would work out. And maybe I am just a GA PCA nerd, and not everyone's that way. But we need more ruling elder involvement. I think that's great. I think ruling elders can get focused on their local congregation, as they should. That's who nominated and elected them. But the work really goes beyond that to presbytery and the denomination. And I just encourage that think through it and try to make it happen. I've got 4 young kids, so I get the taking time off from work and being away from them is a cost. But our other ruling elder, he said it clearly. It's like, it is a cost, but the cost is worth it, and it's what we're called to do as elders.
Steve, Fred, you're the fourth and the fifth Polity Matter bro. Yeah, got any thoughts? Anything you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I'll let Fred have the last word as our stated clerk. I think he needs the last word. There's a lot of things I've been thinking about saying, but I think what's really important for teaching elders to hear is that in many ways, the experience that your ruling elders are going to have at the General Assembly depends not entirely, but in large part on you. And a lot of teaching elders see the General Assembly. This is the reunion for my seminary. This is all the guys that I've gotten to know over the years, and I really want to just spend time hanging out with them. And not that there's no place for that, but the last 3 years that we brought ruling elders, I mean, they go where I go. I sit with them. I try to explain things if they have questions. And when I go to one of the dinners that are assigned, or we just go hang out with a bunch of people that I know, they go with me, and they seem like they had a good time, rather than sort of like when you're teenagers, you used to take your kids to the mall, and like your kids would just run off and pretend like they don't know you. I think a lot of teaching elders kind of treat their ruling elders that way. So if you want ruling elder involvement, I think that the number one thing that's going to continue to encourage that and support that isn't lowering the cost, isn't, changing schedules and stuff like that. Those are not unimportant. I think the most important thing is that you say to your ruling elders, I love GA, I have a great time, and you're going to have a great time with me because you're going to go where I go. And if you have questions, I'm going to answer them. I'm going to introduce you to people that you would never otherwise get to know. And you're going to feel like you belong here, rather than you're kind of the, not even the fifth wheel, the 18th, 19th wheel, way out there, and nobody cares. So I would just encourage teaching elders to model that and to try to do that for their.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, Steve. So one of the things I've always tried to do as a pastor of a church is sit near my ruling elders, let them know what's going on. I've had, won't be doing it in the future, but preparing my General Assembly recommendations so they know all the issues and, et cetera. Bringing them to places where I go, introducing them to other ruling elders that I know at other places. I understand Jonah's comment. My first General Assembly was 2002 in Birmingham, and we drove in a minivan from Cleveland, Ohio, not Cleveland, Mississippi, Cleveland, Ohio, with 3 young ones, including a toddler. And, if you go to General Assembly, your wife can get hooked up with a lot of women's activities. My wife is a General Assembly veteran. She's probably been to a dozen or 14 GAs. She knows the ladies who regularly go to the Wednesday ladies' lunch. She loves that so much, she refuses to go to the moderator's lunch with me on Wednesday. She goes to be with her ladies' friends. There's usually some kind of VBS type camp thing for youngest ones. And there's usually some kind of youth event for, the teens. And so you can go as a family. It's not Disneyland. It's not the beach. But, they're not going to have to sit in the back of the assembly hall and listen to the debate. And so, you want to be able to do that. And, realizing that an elder is an elder in the church, big C, not just the local church. And so being involved, and I would say another thing that both pastors and elders can do, let your congregation know what's going on at assembly. Do an assembly report. Write an article for them for your church newsletter so that they have an idea. Because usually they're either totally confused or they think the PCA is about to, go belly up. And you say, no, things are actually really good. And here's a shocker. What you read online is probably not exactly the case. It's probably sensationalized. And so, to serve your people, because then they realize, oh, this is what my elders do. And they're talking about important things, and they're giving me updates on mission and church planting and college ministry and et cetera. And I think that's super important. We are a connectional church, and it's up to us as elders to foster that. We have to. That's part of our calling.
Well said. Well said. Well, hey, guys, thank y'all so much for being on. I suppose I should end this the normal way. How about, as our reigning moderator, Mel Duncan, would say, this podcast is over. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. Big thanks to Fred Greco and Steve Tipton and Jonah Cleveland for being on. Thank y'all so much for the work you put in for the denomination. And Jonah, it may sound like I'm saying that to just the other two, but I say that to you as well. As a ruling elder who's interested and participating, it's a big deal. So keep up the good work. Listeners, thank y'all for listening and being with us. Make sure that if you aren't subscribed, you are in your podcast app. We're going to have the conclusion of the Book of Church Order coming out over the next month and a half. We might sort of stagger some weeks, so it might not be as frequent as normal, but it is coming, and we've got things in the works for the fall. So stay tuned. Thank you for supporting us. If you want to support us, there's a link below where you can do that, and that primarily helps us get swag for General Assembly. And speaking of swag, if you wear a double XL, you need to reach out to me because I would love to send you one of our Polity Matters t-shirts. I have a lot of leftover double X's. So some of you guys at GA need to gain some weight or lose some weight. I don't know. Figure that out so that we can have our shirts given out. Anyway, holler at me if you wear double X, and I'd love to send you a t-shirt in the mail. I think that's all I have to say today. We miss Scott and Jared. We'll be back together next week, July 7th. We'll drop our BCO chapter 59 or 60. I can't remember. And that's all I've got. I'm rambling now. This is why I need my co-host back. Anyway, until next time, say goodbye, gentlemen.
Goodbye, gentlemen.
Goodbye.
Y'all take care.